Önce cemborturdan himi jan zoner monum cembor ngagada bakaratar ngonsan do shirmado tomba tuje jan la ki shamza ne chen ruwa zerngi jangamsa jangor tuje shirno yelarmon jeme bamzo jao la soran
The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficulty encountering billions of aeons, and now see it, hear, receive, and uphold it, about to fathom the Dhamma's true meaning, to liberate all beings. Let's generate the supreme bodhicitta. Now, let us continue with the Surangama Sutra. Previously, in the Surangama Sutra class, we've already covered on the part where Ananda asked a few questions, and then the Buddha replied his questions. Currently, we're studying on the part of causes and conditions and the mixing and uniting. Previously, the Buddha said that, Ananda, you are quite clear about that this seeing nature is not a product of causes and condition, nor it is of spontaneity. However, you're still not clear on that this bright, enlightened mind is a production of a mix or of uniting. When it comes to Bodhi mind, this awareness, was it born out of uniting, or was it born out of mixing? Was it born out of uniting with light, or with darkness, or with emptiness, or with solid object? Yesterday, we've already studied that how the Buddha refuted Ananda's idea of that it's a production of mixing and uniting with all of those.
那么这个经典里面就是讲的时候呢，这个和就是这个前面是和平的和，就是后面是那个结合的和，合作的和。
According to some commentaries, the explanation on uniting and mixing is a bit different.
就这破的，然后会合
The previous part
也是这个。分开折破的就是所以韩文如果是
are refuted from the uniting part, and then later part is refuted from the not uniting aspect.
就不同的意思吧，就是这样一
In the Chinese language, there are two terms that's used here, but when they are explained separately, they have a different meaning, which then could be explained in four ways. The first one is uniting, the second one is mixing, and let it be united and then mixed. If we do not unite or mix it, so there are four ways of explaining it, or the four levels. Master Oyi and many great masters, including Master Winning, when they explained it, is that the first one is mixing. It's just like mixing water and soil together. That mix into mud, and then that is mixing.
但是我们一般字面上了解的时候呢，就是和平的和呢，有这个这个和这个，就是也有这个观念和联系的意思吧，就是这样的。
So the first one has, so the uniting has some kind of sense of connection or connecting together. And then the second, which is uniting, is to put them together. But according to lots of commentaries, it says that the uniting means is to be pervasive, meaning to cover it all up, like how there's a lid for the box, and the lid could cover all the box, the whole box. According to the Tibetan translation by Changyur Trungpa Dorje, the first mixing, it is more leaning towards contact, any kinds of touch or contact. The second one is more taking one as a reference, which is uniting. In our following analysis, there are various ways of using logical analysis and reasoning. The reasoning there is similar, but I think there are some. There are a little bit of a difference in terms of the logical reasoning. In the previous class, we've already covered on the logical reasoning on how this bright mind is not a production of mixing with the previous ones. We've already talked about that. And then over here, Buddha said that moreover, Ananda, as you are right now, once again, does the wonderful pure seeing nature unite with light? Does it unite with darkness? Does it unite with emptiness? Or does it unite with solid objects? This is the second step of analysis. The Buddha said that, well, this pure seeing nature, let it be whatever we call it, the body mind or the seeing nature or awareness. So this thing, previously you think that it is a product of mixing and uniting. Is it united with lightness, darkness, emptiness, or blockage from objects? The Buddha then continued to say that if it unites with light, out of the four objects, so let's look at how we can follow that logic. So out of the four types of possibilities of a dharma, then if you choose the first one, if it unites with light, then when darkness comes, the characteristic of light is extinguished. How will you be able to see darkness since the seeing does not unite with darkness? So the Buddha said that, well, when you see light and you say that your awareness is a production of uniting with light, but what if you see darkness? If you see darkness, then lightness must extinguish because they are contradictory. It is, you cannot say that wherever there is bright light and there's still darkness. You shouldn't say that. That is not possible because that is not possible. In that way, when you see darkness, the light, the characteristic of light definitely will extinguish. When the characteristic of light is already extinguished, then your seeing shouldn't be combined or it shouldn't be mixed and united with darkness. Since it is not a production of uniting with darkness, then how come you still see darkness? If your nature is a production only united with light, then you would never need to see darkness again. You would never need a flashlight or any lamp at all. You don't have dark nights at all. Now, the second possibility, if you do see darkness, and yet at that time there is no union with darkness, but rather a union with light, then you would not have seen light. If you were to say that, well, though I see light, I see darkness, but my seeing nature is united with light, then it is to say that, well, I've always been with light, but I see dark. But when you see dark, your seeing nature is united with dark. And then later, if you were to say that I see light because my seeing nature is united with light, when you see dark, you shouldn't be able to see light because the dark has not extinguished. And when you see light, you shouldn't be able to see dark because the light hasn't extinguished. Since you would not have seen light, why is it that when there is union with light, you are able to know clearly that it is light and not darkness? If you were to say that I indeed see darkness, and since you do not see light, then it is not a uniting with light. It is not to understand what light is. If you do not see dark, you shouldn't say that at all because you had never seen light. Without seeing light, then how could you say that your seeing is a production of uniting with light? Because light and dark is completely contradictory. If you have not seen true darkness, then you would not be able to see what light is. And if you were to see light, then darkness, does darkness exist or not? If it exists, then light doesn't exist. If you do not see light, then how could you unite with light? How could you understand that other than darkness there is a light to be known? In fact, either ways, it doesn't make any sense. So after you go through this analysis, you'll be able to understand that the same is true for its union with darkness, with emptiness, and with solid objects. So by now, the 10 ways of uniting the seeing essence with the light has been refuted. Since Ananda thought that this seeing essence is a production of being combined and being united and mixed with the other four dharmas. So through the previous explanations and analysis, by now Ananda should be able to recognize that awareness, this seeing essence, is not a production of a combination with light or the others. Now, to continue, we're going to look at it is not a production of not mixing and uniting with the two either. Ananda then said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, as I consider it, the source of this wonderful enlightenment does not mix or unite with any conditioned mundane object or with the mind's speculation. Is that a case?" Ananda says that, well, now I'm thinking that this enlightened mind, he's using enlightened mind now instead of the other terms. And he said that this enlightened mind does not mix or unite with any conditioned mundane object, which means the five objects, the five adventitious states, such as the form, sound, taste, touch, and so on. And then, nor with the mind's speculation. The mind's speculation in the Tibetan translation, it is translated as the mental consciousness. According to some other commentaries, it is explained as the 6 types of conscious mind, such as the consciousness of eyes, of ears, of nose, and of mind. That could be possible too. Anyhow, Ananda thought that the source of his wonderful enlightenment does not mix or unite with any of the conditioned mundane objects or with the mind's speculation, which is the mental consciousness. Isn't it the production of not mixing and not uniting? He thought that it is not a production of uniting and mixing, then is it a product of not uniting and not mixing? And then the Buddha started to refute him again. Through this refutation, the Buddha refuted the mixing first and then refuted the uniting later. The Buddha said, now you say further that the enlightened nature is neither mixed or united. So now I ask you further. As to this wonderful seeing essence is neither mixing nor uniting. Does it not mix with lights? Does it not mix with darkness? Does it not mix with emptiness? Does it not mix with solid objects? So the Buddha told Ananda, saying that, well, now you think that this nature, the seeing essence, is not a product of uniting and mixing. Then let me ask you this question. What's the question then? This seeing essence, this wonderful essence, if it is a product of not mixing and not uniting, does it not mix with light? Does it not mix with darkness? Does it not mix with emptiness? Does it not mix with solid objects? So the Buddha posed this question through these four aspects. The Buddha continued to say that if it does not mix with light, then between seeing and light there must be a boundary. The Buddha said that, well, if you were to say that, if it is not a product of mixing with light or any of those, then it has nothing to do with light. If that's the case, between your seeing, which is your subject, and the object that is light, let it be a lamp or a sun, there must be a boundary between it. It must be a boundary that separates the light and separates the seeing. Since you're saying that my seeing is not mixed with light, then you have to know what your seeing is, and you have to see what the light is, and then since you said that it's not mixing, you have to know the two, and you have to see that they're separated, and then you have to see that there's a boundary between the two. It is just like when if you were to say, this is my property. If you don't have a boundary for your property, how would others know this is your property? How would others know that how big is their property and whether their property is touching yours? Therefore, there must be a boundary if you say it is not mixing. Examine it further, the Buddha continued to say, what place is light? What place is seeing? Where are the boundaries of the seeing and the light? The Buddha said that, Ananda, carefully observe again. Earlier you said that it is not mixed with light. Since you said it is not mixed with light, then use your wisdom to make this observation. What place is light? What place is seeing? When you're at the place of seeing, where is the boundary of the light? And when you're at the place of light, where is the part of seeing? Where does the seeing end and where does the light end? Where is the boundary? If you cannot find the boundary, then how do you know that it is not mixed with light? Unless you find the boundary in between, then you can't really say that it is not mixed. if you can't even find the boundary for light, if you don't know where light is, then you don't even know what place is light, then how can you know that they're not mixed? Ananda, the Buddha continued to say that if there is no seeing within the boundaries of light, then there is no contract between them. And clearly, one would not know where the characteristic of light is. If you were to say that within the boundary, within the place of light, there is no light, there is no seeing, they are of different entities. You're saying that light and seeing, they're of different entities. There's no touching, no mixing, no contact between them at all. Then how do you know that where light is? Because from the light, your seeing had never been born, had never been produced. Then how do you know light is not there? It is like you were to say there is a vase on the east and another vase on the west. They are separate entities. How do you know each? How do you know where they are? Then how could its boundary be realized? As to its not mixing with darkness, with emptiness, or with solid objects, the principle is the same. You should be able to come to the same conclusion with the same logic. Now that's to refute the first type of mixing. And then the second aspect is about the second aspect of refuting the uniting. Again, as I said, in the Tibetan translation, it's a little bit different. The previous one, in terms of mixing, it is about whether it has contact. And then the second aspect, it is taking as reference. Let's look at the fourth way of making observation to refute on not uniting. Moreover, as to the wonderful seeing essences, neither mixing nor uniting, does it not unite with light? Does it not unite with darkness? Does it not unite with emptiness? Does it not unite with solid objects? If you were to say that this seeing essence is a product of not uniting, is it a product of not uniting with light, not uniting with dark, not uniting with emptiness, or not uniting with solid objects? You should make this observation. If it does not unite with light, the Chinese translation for both words it sounds exactly the same. So it's very difficult for me to differentiate it. Maybe it's because of my poor level of Chinese. But the observation, it seems that there is a little bit of a difference. Therefore, in terms of the great masters' commentaries, it seems that they explained the second one as uniting, and there's a slight difference. The first one is more like a mix. The mixing is more like mixing water and soil together, which mix into mud. And then the second one is more like uniting. The Buddha said that your seeing nature and the object that is light, if it does not unite with the light, if you're seeing nature and the light does not unite, then the light are at odds with each other by nature, as are the year and the light, which do not come in contact. It is to say that, well, these two are completely irrelevant, and they're completely contradictory to each other in its characteristics. There is some old saying in the Tibetan tradition. We say that throwing the torma to the west, where the ghost that's supposed to receive it lives on the east side. So it means to completely miss the point, to completely went the wrong way of solving the problem. Therefore, the Buddha said that if your light and the seeing essence are two separate entities, then it is equivalent to say that our ear faculty and it is to say that our ear faculty to receive the colors and form that's supposed to be the object of the eyes, because our ear faculty can only receive the sounds, and it doesn't perceive the object of form and shape and color. It doesn't have such opportunity of doing so. Since the seeing does not know where the characteristic of light is, how can it determine clearly whether there is union? The Buddha said that, well, if your seeing doesn't even know where the light is, since they are a completely separate entity, just like the West Mountain and the East Mountain, they're on the separate different sides. Your seeing doesn't even know where the characteristic of light is, then how can it determine clearly whether there's union? If you don't even know the characteristic of light, how do you know if it is united or not? However, do you know that there is a union or not? How can you differentiate it? This brilliant mind, whether if it is united with the light or not, how can you know that? This is the last way of making observation. As two is not uniting with darkness, with emptiness, or with solid objects, the principle is the same. So, not uniting with darkness, not uniting with emptiness, not uniting with solid objects. In fact, it is the same way. It follows the same logic. So you should be able to understand it. Now, Ananda previously, he first generated some doubts about whether it is the brilliant mind is a production of causes and conditions, and secondly, he started to have some doubts whether it's spontaneity, or is it a mix and uniting, or is it not mix and uniting? Through making the observation, by the guidance of the Buddha, he started to understand that by no way that this seeing nature can be solidly existent. As we studied earlier, as I stated earlier, that the Buddha simply used various ways to refute Ananda's grasping to the solid existence of this seeing nature. Is there an enlightened mind and seeing nature? Yes, there is. But if you were to hold on to a solid existence of the seeing nature, then that is the same as the heretic's teaching. Let it be any kind of dharma, the inner dharma, the outer dharma, whatever it is, they are not existent in the absolute truth, but appears as illusion in the conventional truth. That is the wonderful enlightenment. If you were to think that, well, this nature, this brilliant mind is not existent. In this way, you're just the same as the materialistic view. You're just following that materialistic philosophy. So I think it's quite important for you to understand that, because during our study and contemplation, if you do not follow this path properly, it's very easy for you to fall into the wrong path. People with only a little wisdom but not reach to that not yet to develop that profound wisdom, then it's very easy for them to only understand a little bit, very superficial knowledge, and then started to use their wrong views to look at the Dharma, then started to slander the Dharma. That is really meaningless and quite pitiful. Anyhow, after this observation, we should be able to come to the kind of understanding of how every phenomena in this conventional world are just dreamlike and illusion-like. The Buddha continued to say that, Ananda, you have not yet understood that all the defiling objects that appear, all the illusory, ephemeral characteristics spring up in the very spot where they also come to an end. They are what is called illusory falseness, but their nature is in truth the bright substance of wonderful enlightenment. This is a quite important teaching given to Ananda. The Buddha said that, well, you still have some confusion, you still don't quite understand. What is it that you don't understand? In fact, we can also see some of the understanding of Ananda is that he still does not understand how everything is just a manifestation, just as an illusion. Illusory manifestation. In the Tibetan language, they are separated into two words as well. Just as the Chinese language, it's an illusory manifestation. The Buddha said that all of them, these defiling objects, at the moment that it appears, it comes to an end. This kind of illusory manifestation is called the characteristic. This illusory falseness, rather. But their nature is in truth the bright substance of wonderful enlightenment. This part, for people who studied the Vimalakirti Sutra and the Uttara Tantra Shastra, it should be quite clear to you. Because on one hand, everything's just like a dream, like an illusion. On the other, the nature, the essence of Buddha nature is without wavering. It exists in such a way that without moving, without wavering. Everything, at the time it's born, it ceases. This is the illusion. That is why in the conventional world, we call it like a dream, like an illusion. But the nature of it is without any movement. According to Bodhidharma's bloodstream sermon, he said that all the conditioned dharma are just like dream and illusion. All of those conditioned dharmas are just like dreams and illusions. If one do not quickly find a teacher, then they will easily to squander their life. Though one still have the Buddha nature, it is primordially there, it is intrinsically existent. However, without a teacher, we will not be able to see it at all. Now that we have the fortune to encounter the Mahayana teaching and the spiritual teacher, we have already understood, already received the teaching of how all conditioned phenomena are impermanent, and we already know that we have this Buddha nature. Of course, without these kinds of teachings, it will be very difficult for us to attain liberation. So I really hope that the Sangha members who are listening to this class can transcribe this particular passage of teaching on your own, write it down, that you have not yet understood that all defiling objects that appear, all the illusory, ephemeral characteristics spring up in the very spot where they also come to an end. They are what is called illusory falseness, but their nature is in truth the bright substance of wonderful enlightenment. I remember another story of a Zen master, a new writing, a new record of the great masters, where there's a Zen master whose name is Ru Song. When he was young, at the time of birth, his mother gifted a monk a monastic robe in her dream, that is. And then later, after he was born, he got ordained at a very young age. He relied on Master Lian Qi in Ming Dynasty, and then he started to study the Perfect Enlightenment Sutra. When he was reading that, there's a part of it he doesn't understand. Therefore, he decided to get into a retreat so that he could generate the understanding, because that kind of understanding has to be beyond of conceptual mind. After his retreat, he still haven't understood the teaching yet. Therefore, he went to study with Master Zibo. And then when he studied with Master Zibo, he studied the Surangama Sutra. At this particular part, when he read this particular passage, he asked a question to Master Zibo, and then Master Zibo scolded him very strictly. While he's strictly scolding him, he attained realization and then started to pay homage and prostrate to Master Zibo. And then he said that all the teachings are not understood should not be understood by the dualistic mind. Later, there are many other stories about him. For example, in the record of the noble ones who take rebirth in Pure Land, it says that at the later time of his life, while he was writing a verse, he passed into parinirvana and took rebirth in Pure Land. In his early life, he studied Surangama Sutra and studied mainly the Zen tradition. And in his later life, he mainly studied the Pure Land school and went to Pure Land after his parinirvana. In his biography, it says that while he studied this particular passage, he attained realization. Since we now also have the opportunity to study such profound teaching, though our capacities are different than that of the great masters. Maybe we don't have any realization at all or any insights at all. But anyhow, we should try our best to recite the teachings where the great masters attain realization at. Just as Ponsu Rinpoche, since he thinks that the pointing out instruction are definitely the key to attain enlightenment, therefore he continuously to chant that for 1,000 times, and then he attained the realization of the nature of mind 10,000 times of pointing out instruction. So 10,000 times over pointing out, and the supplication of Mipa Rinpoche was 100,000 times or 1,000,000 times. I can't quite remember. Anyhow, at that time, Ponsu Rinpoche thought that by relying on it, one will definitely be able to attain realization. So we have to have this kind of faith. If we were to just see it as, oh, they're just words, so I can just take this point and highlight that point and then that's it and forget about it. That is not very fruitful. Thus, it is through up to 5 skandhas and 6 entrances, the 12 places and 18 realms. The union and mixture of various causes and conditions account for their illusory and false existence. The 6 entrances, the 6, which means the 6 roots, and then the 12 ayatanas means the 6 roots plus the 6 objects as perceived by the 6 roots, and then the 18 dhatus, meaning the 12 ayatanas plus the 6 consciousness. And then the Buddha said that the union and mixture of the various causes and conditions account for their illusory and false existence, and the separation and the dispersion of the cause and condition result in their illusory and false extinction. So all of those things, let it be the 5 skandhas all the way to the 18 dhatus, all of these dharmas, they're simply the production of causes and conditions. When the causes and conditions account for their illusory and false existence, according to Master Changshui's explanation, he said that it means that the causes and conditions are falsely existent. At that time, when there's the falsely existent causes and conditions makes this combination, there's the compounded causes and conditions, then it will be produced. Who would have thought that production, extinction, coming and going are fundamentally the everlasting, wonderful light of the treasury of the thus come one? We have no idea all the coming, going, birth, and death. All of these dharmas are simply abiding in Buddha nature. The unmoving, all-pervading perfection, the wonderful nature of the true suchness. In fact, the luminosity and purity is always existent. It is unmoving. It is all-pervasive throughout all. If within the true and eternal nature one seeks coming and going, confusion and enlightenment, or birth and death, there is nothing that can be obtained. If one were to seek in such a way, then it is really looking for something that is not attainable at all, because they are simply illusion. According to Lankavatara Sutra, it says that the habitual tendencies would confuse the mind. Therefore, the three existence appears. Originally, there is no birth, there is no extinction. Since there is no birth to start with, there is no extinction at all. In the true nature, they are not attainable at all. We often say, especially those of you who study Madhyamika, we say that everything in absolute truth is completely devoid of the 4 extremes and the 8 elaborations, though that maybe some of you have already understood that or have already attained that realization. However, you should understand that our conventional virtuous roots should not be destroyed, should not be eradicated either. According to the new continuum of the biography of great masters, there was once a master Zhi Zhao, and he studied later with Master Tongji. He studied Surangama Sutra for over 10 years, and then later he attained certain realization through relying on Surangama Sutra. But after attained liberation, after attained realization, he did not just give up practice. Rather, he started to use his own blood to write the 80 volumes of Avatamsaka Sutra and then 7 volumes of the Lotus Sutra. So I really think these great masters of the past, they're really admirable. After writing those sutras after copying and transcribing those sutras with his own blood, he started to pay prostration to the Amrita, to the relic stupas. Maybe the relic stupas that's built by Ashoka. And then he offered his fingers to the Buddha by burning his 2 fingers. Also, he started to build his monastery in throughout 8 years. At the time of finishing building, at the time of completion, all of a sudden there's a gustly wind. All of a sudden, just within a very short period of time, all the constructions are destroyed. Last winter, there was a ghastly wind in my monastery as well, though that we didn't complete all the constructions, but part of the construction was destroyed too. After his construction was destroyed, for a period of time, that Dharma teacher appeared to be quite sad. And then he continued to build for another 3 years and completed the construction. But whatever he would encounter, he would read the Surangama Sutra every day. He had never stopped it. I think lots of the great masters in the history of the Chinese Buddhism, many lay practitioners and lots of great practitioners, they're very good at reading sutras. Some would read the Lotus Sutra, some the Vimalakirti Sutra, some of the Surangama Sutra. Though that recently not many people are teaching the Surangama Sutra, I really hope that after this time, after we study this Surangama Sutra, many of you will start to propagate the Surangama Sutra, to again propagate it, to make the Surangama Sutra flourishing everywhere again, to thrive the tradition of Surangama Sutra again. I think everyone should use your different capacity to do different things, such as printing books, and giving teachings and so on. Nowadays, when it comes to printing books, it's very easy. It is no longer the very ancient technology or ancient methods to print books anymore. After you finish printing the book, do not send it to us. Send it to people who need it. After that, you should give teachings on it. Because the Surangama Sutra, the most profound part of the Surangama Sutra is within the first 2 volumes, and we're almost finishing the first 2 volumes. So we should be able to finish it in 2 days. Therefore, usually the Maras are not very happy at the very beginning of studying the Surangama Sutra, since it is the most profound. The Maras would create lots of obstacles at the beginning, but after that, usually it should be quite easy. Anyhow, what I wanted to say is that this Zen master Zhizhao, throughout his life, by relying on Surangama Sutra, he had attained realization. And later he continued to persistently accumulate merit. That is exactly what Ponsok Rinpoche used to say. Do not just because you had attained some realization and then stopped accumulate merits. You have to be diligent all the way through. This is quite important. Whenever we're studying the sutras and shastras, though that we know that everything is without birth, without death, without coming, without going, it sounds like we already understand. But In fact, it is still very difficult for us to carry out our actions that is according to our realization. So we should continuously to study and to practice virtuous deeds. Just as Master Rizhao, he transcribed so many sutras with his own blood and made offering to the Buddha and then built the monasteries and never stopped his chanting. All of these virtuous deeds without interruption. 10 volumes of Surangama Sutra every day. I think it would be very difficult for us, especially for me, whose Chinese reading ability is rather quite bad. If I were to read the whole Surangama Sutra, I don't know how long it's going to take. Anyhow, we can see that by reading one time, the Surangama Sutra will take a whole day. So we can see that he indeed put lots of effort into reading it fluently, and then with great faith, it would be extremely beneficial. Let's now continue with the next part. Ananda, why do I say that the 5 skandhas are basically the wonderful nature of true suchness, the treasury of thus come one? In the Illusory Net, it also talks about how the 5 skandhas are just the 5 Buddhas. Out of the 5 skandhas, the Buddha first made the analysis of how the form is empty, and then later the other 4 skandhas, and then that should conclude the second chapter. And today we'll just talk about the form aspect.
他这里这样讲的那个阿难呢
Ananda, consider this example. When a person who has pure, clear eyes looks at clear, bright emptiness, he sees nothing but clear emptiness, and he is quite certain that nothing exists within it. Now, the Buddha gives the example of the form skandha in the 5 skandhas. If a person who has pure, clear eyes without any eye disease, and then looks into space, the only thing he sees is nothing but clear emptiness. With his clear eyes without any disease, if a person looks into the sky, just like the sky in the fall in Tibetan Plateau, usually one would be able to see this clear blue sky without any obscurations. If, for no apparent reason, the person does not move his eyes but staring will cause fatigue, and then of his own accord, he will see strange flowers in space and other unusual appearances that are wild and disordered. Out of no apparent reason, without any particular reason, since one's eye is very much focused in the space. According to the commentary, no apparent reason means there's no other causes and conditions. But if one were to stare into the space for a long period of time, the eye would get fatigued. And because of that, in this space, one will be able to see strange flowers. And sometimes we call them as hair floating in space. It is because of the eyes. Or all kinds of disorder, all kinds of illusions, such as horses and elephants. Though that in the Ati tradition, we do have a particular way of sitting and then stare into the space. And then in the space, there will be appearance of Vajra chain. But the Vajra chain is does not appear because of fatigue or because of disorder. Rather, the Vajra chains are the forms of the Buddha nature. Through relying on the channels of the eyes, one will be able to see the form through the space. These teachings were taught in the Seven Treasures and the Ishilama. They're teachings of practicing the 7 days of Toga, but those practices are different than the description over here. So this person is different. This person just keep looking, staring into the space, and after a long time, since eyes started to get really tired and all kinds of illusions started to appear. We usually say that all phenomena are just like hair floating in space. Especially when we studied Madhyamika, especially the ornament of Madhyamika. It is a very important example of teaching, especially when it comes to the conventional aspect taught by Chittamatra school, the mind-only school. The illusions and all the disorders in the appearance, they are unreal. And then the Buddha said that you should know that it is the same with the skandha form. Skandha form is exactly like that. It is unreal. According to Abhidharma and the Gateway to Knowledge, it says that there are 11 types of form in the skandha form. There are the 4 forms associated with the cause. That's the water, fire, earth, and wind. And then in terms of fruition, there are the 10 types of form, the 5 roots and the 5 objects. So the sound, form, smell, touch, fragrance, those are all part of form. And then there is the form without appearance. That's the 11th. According to Master Xuanhua's teaching, his particular pronunciation has his pronunciation has such a particular dialect where he pronounced form in a different way. How would people with Sichuan dialect say it? Anyhow, over here it says that it is the same with skandha form. Ananda, the strange flowers come neither from emptiness nor from the eyes. The Buddha started to make the analysis. He said that, well, these kinds of strange and wild flowers did not come from emptiness nor from the eyes. Now we know that the flowers or whatever kinds of delusion that you can see in the space, they are not a production from empty space nor from the eyes. Please pay attention now, because it's a bit difficult to understand. We know that it is neither from the space nor from the eyes. It is something that just appears somewhere in the middle. The reason for this, Ananda, is that if the flowers were to come from emptiness, they would return to emptiness. If there is a coming out and a going in, the space would not be empty. So this flower in space, if this flower comes from emptiness, then it would definitely return back to space, to emptiness. Because there is a place for the production, then there is a place for extinction.
最终呢就是也会归于就是什么地方，就是这样的话呢就是趋入于空，就是我们表面上看啊就是空中来空中这个去的话呢，
We often would say that, well, sure, it comes in from the space and goes back into the space again.
如果是一个实有的东西的话
Of course, we can say that if there is something that is truly existent. But since there is no true existence to this particular delusion of flower, then how could you say that there is a coming and going, there is a birth and death to it?
就是那这样的话呢，它有出的地方，就是也有入的地方，就是那如果没有这个出的地方没有
If there is a coming out and going in, the space would not be
那这个
empty.
不叫这个虚空来的，就是也没有什么的，就是
So if you were to say that it has a solid existence, then the space is no longer space, emptiness is no
如
longer
果它真的
emptiness.
有这个出入的实体的话呢，那有实体了，那有实体的话呢，它不是这个虚空，就是不是虚空了。
If
就是因为
the
虚空的
flower
话呢，就是没有
comes
阻碍这
from
个它的发想。
space,
那如果
from
有
this
这个阻碍的
empty,
话呢，就是那不是这个
then
虚
goes
空的
back
发想。
into space,
空
which is
若非
empty,
空，如果这个
then
虚空呢，就是它不
the
具备虚
empty
空的发
were
想，
not
就是它
empty.
有这个实体的话呢，
Because
那
you were
自
to
不
say
容其化
empty
相
has
即
a solid
不异，就是
existence.
那这样的话呢，就是刚才这个
If
空中的这个
emptiness
画
were
空
not
中的这个
empty, then
幻化
it
的
could
话呢，
not
就是
contain
它自己呢，
appearances
就是
of
没办
arisal
法
and
就是
extinction of the
这个因为虚
flowers.
空的话呢，就是它根
How
本没
could you
办法
say
容
that a
容纳
space
什么
could
呢？就是这个
produce
虚空呢，就是在
flowers?
中间呢，
How could you
来
say
和
that
这
there
个
is a coming
就
and
是去吧，
going
就是或者说是
within
生
this
和灭，
space,
因为虚空
the
它已
birth and
经有了
death?
实体，虚空它有了实体的话呢，那虚空
If
的
you were
实
to
体
say
当
that
中
a
呢，不
space
可能
has
那
an
个
solid
就是
existence,
这个空化呢，就出来，就是然后
then how
然后
could
呢又进入
a
了它，就
flower,
像是如阿难体
the
不
empty
容阿
flower
难，
that
就是
appears
不
in
容
the
阿
solid
难，就是那
existence of
你阿
space,
难这
and
个身体
then
呢本来都是有实体的东
once
西，如
it
果你有实
gets
体的话
out
呢，
of
就是
that
阿难
space
的
and
这
then
个
gets into
身
the
体
space
当中呢
again.
又出现一个阿难，就是然后空
Just
中
as
化一下
Ananda's
就
body
然后
cannot
又融
contain
入这个
another
阿难的话，
Ananda.
那这个是不可能的事情吧，就是绝对不可能。所以呢，
Since
你
the
刚才
body
所
of
说的这
Ananda
个
is right over
这个
here,
空化呢，如果
since
空
it is
中来的
already
这种道
solidly
理呢，就是
existent,
不合理
then
的，就是
all of
这
a
样就
sudden
不
you
完
were to
的。
say that there's another
如
Ananda
果出
inside
这
Ananda's body.
其实这个我觉得
That is not
这个
possible.
蓝眼睛呢，就是学过移民的人可能讲
I
的好一
think
点。
after
如果没有学
people
过
who
移民，没有
studied
学过中国的
Buddhist
话呢，
logic,
就光
it
是这
would
个
be
蓝眼
easy
睛
for
就是
them
这样的
to
话呢，就是不一定
explain
讲的特别
Surangama
除了字
Sutra.
面上的解
Otherwise,
释以外呢，就是它的
it
这
would
个
be difficult
有些
because
推理的
this
这种方
particular
式呢，
type
就
of
可能很难
logic
懂。所以
analysis,
以后要
it
可
would
能
be
讲蓝
difficult
眼
for
睛的
people
话
who
呢，就是至
who
少
have
是
not
能
studied
移民，
Buddhist
就是不
logic.
说是非常精通，
So
但
for
是至
people who
少
want
是
to
这
give
个
teachings
移
on the
民呢
Surangama
经
Sutra,
常
you
过
have
的
to
关，就是能机
you
会
have
以
to
后呢，就
understand
是才
some
可以可
Buddhist
能
logic.
讲得
You
出
have
来。
to
如
pass
果
the Buddhist logic
如
courses
木处
first.
者，即
And then
从
the
木
sutra says
处
if the flowers
换
were to
从
come
入
from
木
the
处。如果你
eyes,
说
they
是不
would
是虚
return
空
to
来
the
的，就是
eyes.
从眼睛里面出的这个
Well,
毛
now
发。
if you were
那
to
这
say
样的
that
话
the
呢，既然你
flowers
从这个眼睛当中
were
出
born
来
from
的
your
话呢，
eyes and
那
then
最后的
returns
话
to
呢，
your
就是也
eyes.
是这个回归于眼睛。我们世间人也是经
The
常说是
worldly
路
beings
也
usually
是
would say
什么
that
法子是
the
从哪里
fallen
来的，
leaf
这
would
个呢，
go
就
back
也是
to
回
its
归到那
root.
个地方。那这样的话呢，既
If
然
we
它
were
是
to
从
say
眼
that
睛里面出来的
since
话呢，
the
那它有
flowers
这
were
个
a
就是最后呢，就是
production
它还是
from your
可以
eyes,
回
then
归到
the
眼
flower
睛
should
当
be
中。
able to go back to
那
your
么
eyes then.
其次化性呢，从母出国。那这样的话，我们这个化的本
If the
性
nature
的
of the
话呢，
flower
就
were
是实
to
际上
come
是
from
从
the
这个
eyes,
眼睛里面出来的。那眼睛里面出来的话呢，当和有见，就
it
是既
would
然
be
有
endowed
眼睛
with
里面出
the
来的话，它
faculty
应
of
该有
seeing.
这种能
If
见
the
事物的这
flowers
种
were
共
to
鸣，就是
be
它有
born
这个
from
同
your
类的
eyes,
因子。
then the
这个是一种
flowers, since it
推理
shares
呢，
the
就是
same
直接把
cause
它
with
这
your
个
eyes, then it
怎
should
么
also
算
have the
推理，
faculty
就
of
是通过
seeing.
这个推理来让它就是
Through
不得不
logic,
承认，就是
you
这样的，就是
would
它
come to
并不
that
是对方
conclusion,
完全
isn't
承
it?
认的。既然你这个从眼睛里面出来的话呢，那眼睛里面
While
就
the
应该
flowers
有它
comes
这
from
个
your
同类的
eyes,
一个中
then
性的，就这样的
it
出
should
来。
be of
那
the
眼睛
same
是能见到事
category
物的，
with
这
your
样的
eyes,
话呢，当
therefore
和有见，
the
那
same
这
capacity
个
of
空
your
化的
eyes,
话呢，就是
so
它也
it should
应该
also
有
have
像
the
眼睛一
faculty
样
of
的能见
seeing.
到这个其他事物
It
的
should
这样
be
的功能。若
of
有
the
见
same
者，
capacity
这
like the eyes
具
that
空
could see
化
other things. If it could see, then when it left the eyes, it would become flowers in the space, and when it returns, it should see the eyes. So when the flowers, once it becomes the flowers stays in space, and when it comes back, when it returns back to the eyes, then the flower, since it has the capacity to see, then it should be able to see the eyes. It should be able to see things see things while it is floating in the space, and it should be able to see your eyes when it returns back to your eyes. If it did not see, then when it left the eyes, it would obscure emptiness, and when it returned, it would obscure the eyes. If it does not see, when the flower goes into the space, then it should obscure the space. And then when it returns, it should also obscure the eyes. The Buddha's wisdom is very sharp. As I said previously, even if we don't mention the supreme wisdom of omniscience and seeing things, of seeing the nature of things, even if we just look at the analysis and the logic of the Buddha, it is quite admirable. In a worldly sense, if we were to see someone who's very good at writing a detailed analysis of essay, we would feel, oh, that's quite admirable. But when we look at Buddha's analysis in the Surangama Sutra, we should also generate that kind of admiration and faith. Let's look at how Buddha talked about this flower. He said that, well, this flower, if you were to say that this flower doesn't see, then it must be something that should be able to obscure the space. Not only to obscure space, at the time it returns back to your eyes, it should obscure your eye. It should block your eye at that time. Moreover, when you see the flowers, your eyes should not be obscured. Because if your eyes were obscured, when you see the flowers, then you shouldn't be able to see the flowers. That is under the premise that your eyes are not diseased. Then in that way, your eyes should not be obscured. So your eyes should not be obscured at that time. Then why is it that the eyes are said to be pure and bright when they see clear emptiness? Therefore, you should know that skandhas of form is empty and false, because it neither depends on causes and conditions for existence, nor is spontaneous in nature. It is not a production of causes and conditions. It is not out of spontaneity. This kinds of skandha of form, they're simply illusion. According to Avatamsaka Sutra, it says that if the disease of the eye can be eradicated, then one would be able to part from the grasping to form. If one do not see all the phenomena, then that is seeing the true Buddha. This is very similar to the teaching to the Surangama Sutra here. Through this kinds of observation, we should know that the skandha form, in fact, they're just like the flower in space or the hair in space. There is no intrinsic nature to it. It is simply because of sentient beings have the eye disease, therefore all kinds of form would appear in front of our eyes. Once our eye disease is healed, is disappeared, then we would be able to see the true Buddha. As it is stated in the Diamond Sutra, if one were to seek for me through the form, through the sound, that is simply people treading on the wrong path. They would not be able to see the true Buddha. It means that parting from all kinds of elaborations and extremes, that is the true Dharmakaya. Now we'll stop here on the Surangama Sutra today.